The early Merovingian state was built on physical momentum. Kings proved their authority in the saddle, securing borders through direct military campaigns and battlefield command. But less than 2 centuries later, the descendants of those warlords were confined to a single country estate, completely stripped of operational capacity. They were paraded in front of their subjects on a wooden ox cart, holding the title of king but wielding zero actual power. This loss of authority traces back to the year 613. King Clothar II successfully captured his rivals and unified the Frankish kingdoms under a single crown. But in the exact moment he consolidated the map, he signed away the mechanisms of royal power. The instrument of this decay was the Edict of Paris in 614. It was framed as a legal reform, but it functioned as a corporate compromise that permanently decentralized executive authority into the hands of the regional nobility. Clothar's son, Dagobert I, would act as the final aggressive executive masking the structural decay, artificially holding the state together through immense personal wealth before the monarchy transitioned into a line of ceremonial figureheads. A unified map gave the illusion of a strong central government. In reality, the maximum territorial expansion of Francia triggered an administrative crisis that hollowed out the Merovingian executive from the inside. This map shows the geographical reality of 613. Clothar merged Austrasia, Neustria, and Burgundy into a single continuous block. But governing this expanse using traditional military logic was impossible. The sheer distance created an administrative nightmare, generating intense friction with entrenched regional aristocracies. Clothar did not win this massive kingdom entirely through conquest. He secured it because the Austrasian and Burgundian nobility betrayed their regent, Queen Brunhilda, and handed Clothar the crown. Now they expected a return on their investment. In 614, Clothar convened the Council of Paris. These regional nobles arrived to treat the gathering like a high-stakes liquidation, demanding payment for the political debts the king owed them. The aristocracy's terms were clear. They demanded a systematic reduction in royal overreach and binding legal guarantees of their own local autonomy. The military victory of 613 had created an administrative trap. To govern the state he had just unified, Clothar had to empower the regional lords who helped him acquire it, permanently ceding his own executive reach in the process. The immediate legislative result of this meeting was the Edict of Paris. It functioned as a binding shareholder agreement between the Merovingian crown and the regional aristocracy. Its stated purpose was to restore peace and discipline to the kingdom. In administrative terms, this was code for standardizing appointments and halting what the nobility viewed as royal abuses of power. The structural core of this agreement lies in Article 12, the specific clause that altered the Merovingian state machine. Article 12 established a strict legal restriction. Judges and administrative officials could only be appointed in the regions where they already held property. No official could be assigned to a province from the outside. The operational consequence was immediate. The king was permanently blocked from installing his own loyalists across provincial lines to enforce central policy. The clause justified this by claiming a judge's local property would act as insurance against unlawful seizures. But financially, this tied governance directly to private land, completely localizing wealth and allowing regional officials to bypass royal fiscal oversight. This created an intensely local character within Francia. Because the administration was entirely recruited from the local landholders, those regional magnates became virtually untouchable by the crown. Article 12 legally locked the king out of the provinces. By agreeing to respect these provincial privileges, Clothar II transformed his role from an absolute monarch into a managed figurehead confined by local jurisdictions. As the king's direct reach contracted, a new administrative role expanded to fill the void: the mayor of the palace, or major domus. Originally, this was a minor managerial position, responsible for the daily logistics of the royal household. During the decades of royal feuding that preceded unification, the role expanded. The mayor evolved into a steward of lands, interacting directly with aristocratic properties while the kings were occupied with civil war. 3 years after the Edict of Paris, at Bonneuil-sur-Marne, the regional nobility induced Clothar to make the mayoralty a lifetime appointment. This organizational chart shows the operational shift. By securing a lifetime tenure, the mayors severed their reliance on the king's favor and became the permanent, untouchable representative of the regional nobility. The mayor now acted as the chief operating officer of the state. They controlled state logistics, managed military mobilization, and intercepted communications before they ever reached the throne. By granting the mayor a lifetime appointment, the aristocracy successfully installed a permanent firewall. The king retained his ceremonial office, but the actual levers of state power had been routed directly into the hands of the nobility. When Clothar's son, Dagobert I, took power, he operated as the last highly effective Merovingian king. He had originally been appointed to rule Austrasia as a way to bind the eastern nobility to the crown. Dagobert bypassed the crippled domestic bureaucracy, choosing instead to fund his reign through aggressive taxation and massive external plunder. He led raids across the borders, extracting massive wealth. A single intervention in the Visigothic succession in Spain earned Dagobert 200,000 gold solidi. He utilized this massive, highly localized treasury to artificially buy loyalty. He funded monumental public relations projects, like this heavy bronze throne, to project royal authority, bypassing the need for a functional tax apparatus. He paired this spending with ruthless internal politics. When his half-brother challenged him for control of Neustria, Dagobert assassinated his rival's advocate, a noble named Brodulf, to consolidate his grip on the western territories. But despite his wealth and aggression, Dagobert still had to cede structural power. To appease the eastern nobles, he was forced by Pepin of Landen, the powerful Austrasian mayor, to install his own infant son on the Austrasian throne, granting them semi-autonomy. Dagobert's authority rested entirely on his personal momentum and his sheer capacity to generate wealth, not on a functioning, institutionalized royal bureaucracy. His success was an illusion. Dagobert did not fix the fatal compromise of 614. He merely outspent it. He ensured that the moment the external cash flow stopped, the executive apparatus would instantly collapse. In 639, Dagobert contracted dysentery and died at just 36 years old. His death created an immediate and massive power vacuum. The mayors of the palace immediately recouped their positions. With no adult king to generate wealth or command armies, they stepped in to manage the boy kings who inherited the fractured thrones. This initiated a century-long era of the raw fainéants, the do-nothing kings. The Merovingian monarchs were reduced to children who rarely lived long enough to produce an heir. The Carolingian biographer Einhard documented their precise operational state. He noted they had nothing left but a vain title, flowing hair, and scripts that were handed to them to read to foreign ambassadors. The physical reality of the raw fainéants was total isolation. Stripped of the royal treasury, they were confined to a single country estate, entirely dependent on a precarious stipend issued at the discretion of the mayor. Outside that estate, the mayors possessed total, unchecked control of the Frankish military and administrative machine. The mayors simply stopped routing the state's resources to the king's desk, effectively starving the Merovingian office through bureaucratic attrition. By the late 7th and early 8th centuries, the Merovingian bloodline was maintained strictly for ceremonial and religious legitimacy. They were kept alive solely because the public still revered their lineage. The mayors of the palace, who would soon formally establish the Carolingian dynasty, functioned as the absolute rulers of Francia in everything but name, commanding armies and drafting treaties. When the final Merovingian king, Childeric III, was officially deposed in 751, it was a formality. It ended a dynasty that had been operationally dead for an entire century. These final kings were trapped by the very bureaucracy their ancestors had authorized. Their legacy is one of complete paralysis, locked out of the system they built. The unification under Clothar II proved to be the ultimate Pyrrhic victory. In attempting to build a massive state machine through the Edict of Paris, the Merovingian kings engineered their own obsolescence. They proved that true executive power relies entirely on logistics and administration, not royal blood.